red blade snaps to life in the darkness. For a moment, it is the only thing that exists, not the ruined stone around it, not the cold wind moving through broken corridors, not the ancient carvings worn smooth by centuries of dust. Just that crimson light burning against the black. The blade hums softly inside a forgotten temple, and the figure holding it stands completely alone. Everyone who trained him is gone. Everyone who hunted him is gone. Entire governments have risen and fallen around him. Yet somehow he remains. And as you settle in tonight, following the slow rhythm of this story towards sleep, we will trace the complete life of Darth Maul, a life defined not by victory, but by survival. If you've traveled with these stories before, quietly note which night of the journey you're on. If you're new here, simply call this night one. Then let your breathing slow as we drift into one of the strangest lives in all of Star Wars canon. Because when people remember Darth Maul, they often remember only a few minutes from the Phantom Menace. They remember a black and red face, a double-bladed lightsaber, a duel on Naboo. Yet that brief appearance hides a far larger story, stretching from the final decades of the Galactic Republic to the dark years of the Empire. Few characters witnessed so many turning points in galactic history. Fewer still endured them. Why did Darth Sidious choose this child? That question hangs over the earliest years of Maul's life. Canon tells us that Maul was born on Dathomir around 54 BBY, decades before the Clone Wars and long before the rise of the Empire. Dathomir was already a world of shadows and danger. Dense forests covered much of its surface. Strange creatures stalked its wilderness. The planet was home to the Night Sisters, powerful Force users who practiced magic unlike the teachings of either the Jedi or the Sith. Among them stood Mother Talzin, one of the most influential figures ever produced by Dathomir. She would become central not only to Maul's destiny, but to the fate of the Clone Wars themselves. The Dathomir of canon is a harsh place. Night Sister clans wielded mystical powers rooted in the dark side. Their green magic could heal wounds, cloud mines, summon illusions, and perform rituals that even seasoned Jedi found unsettling. Alongside them lived the Night Brothers, warrior clans who occupied a different role within Dathomir's society. Maul was born among these people. He was not raised in the shining halls of Coruscant. He did not grow up beneath the careful instruction of Jedi masters. His earliest environment was one where strength mattered, survival mattered, and weakness could be fatal. Even before Sidious entered the picture, the world itself was already shaping him. Canon leaves some gaps in these earliest years, and within those gaps a fascinating mystery appears. Mother Talzin and Darth Sidious clearly knew one another long before the events of the Phantom Menace. In later stories, particularly the Clone Wars and Son of Dathomir, we learn that Talzin believed Sidious had deceived her and stolen her future. The exact details remain partly obscured, but the conflict between them stretched back decades. Many fans have wondered whether Maul was simply taken as an apprentice or whether Sidious saw him as a way to weaken Talzin herself. Canon never fully answers the question. It only leaves traces behind like footprints disappearing into mist. Whatever Sidious saw, he acted. At some point during Maul's childhood, the future Emperor claimed him as his apprentice. The galaxy at that time still believed the Sith were extinct. 1,000 years had passed since the old Sith Wars. The Jedi Order, headquartered in the great Jedi Temple on Coruscant, taught that the Sith had vanished into history. Yet hidden behind the facade of the Republic, Darth Sidious was already building his plans. He had inherited the mantle of the Sith from Darth Plagueis. He was learning patience, manipulation, and political control. And somewhere beyond the attention of the Jedi Council, he began molding a young Zabrak into a weapon. What makes Maul's training unusual is how different it was from that of many Sith before him. The Sith traditionally sought power through knowledge as well as combat. Apprentices learned history, philosophy, deception, and the intricate traditions of their order. Maul certainly learned aspects of these things. Yet even in canon sources, he emerges as something more focused than a traditional Sith apprentice. He was sharpened toward a single purpose. Sidious trained him to hate the Jedi, trained him to fight them, trained him to wait. Years passed in secrecy while Maul prepared for enemies he had never met. Imagine that existence. Your entire life aimed at a target visible only through the words of your master. The canon comic Darth Maul, published by Marvel in 2017, offers a glimpse into this period. There we find Maul already burning with impatience. He longs to confront Jedi directly. Sidious repeatedly forbids it. The rule of two demands secrecy. The Sith cannot reveal themselves prematurely. Maul obeys, but barely. Beneath every mission lies frustration. Beneath every success lies hunger. He is like a starship engine held at maximum power while its brakes remain locked. Eventually something must give. The galaxy around him moved through the final decades of the Republic, almost unaware of the danger growing beneath the surface. On Coruscant, thousands of senators debated legislation. Trade routes crossed the stars. The Jedi served as peacekeepers. Vast ships traveled the hyperlanes, linking worlds from core to rim. Few citizens had ever seen a Sith. Most believed the ancient conflict between Jedi and Sith belonged to distant history. Yet while they slept, while freighters crossed hyperspace and diplomats negotiated treaties, Sidious was preparing the first visible blow of his long campaign against the Republic. Why keep Maul hidden for so many years, if he was meant to be used? That question becomes more intriguing the longer you examine it. Sidious possessed enormous patience. Every move served a larger strategy. Maul was not merely a warrior, he was evidence. The moment a Sith appeared before the Jedi, the entire galaxy would begin changing. The Jedi Council would sense that old assumptions had failed. Fear would spread. Questions would multiply. Maul's eventual emergence would not simply start a duel. It would announce that 1,000 years of certainty had come to an end. As the years passed, the apprentice continued to evolve. He mastered the use of a double-bladed lightsaber, a weapon rarely seen even among Jedi. The design echoed ancient Sith traditions and demanded extraordinary precision. Each movement carried danger. A slight mistake could injure the wielder as easily as an opponent. Maul embraced the challenge. His combat style became fast, aggressive, and relentless. Where some duelists relied on measured defense, Maul overwhelmed. He spun, advanced, pressured, and attacked from unexpected angles. Even before the Jedi learned his name, he was becoming one of the most formidable warriors in the galaxy. Yet for all his skill, something essential was missing. He had never truly chosen his path. From childhood onward, Every decision had been shaped by Sidious. Every belief had been planted. Every hatred had been cultivated. The future Darth Vader would choose the dark side after a tragic fall. Count Dooku would leave the Jedi through conviction and disillusionment. Maul's story was different. He belonged to the dark side before he was old enough to understand what that meant. His identity and his purpose had been fused together from the beginning, and so the years of waiting continued. Across the galaxy, events were quietly approaching a breaking point. Trade disputes intensified. The influence of the Trade Federation expanded. Political corruption spread through the Senate. Chancellor Finis Valorum struggled to maintain authority. The Republic appeared stable from a distance, but cracks were forming beneath its surface. Sidious saw every one of them. He intended to widen them all, and somewhere in the shadows, hidden from the Jedi and almost invisible to history itself, his apprentice waited for the moment when the Sith would finally step back into the light. Far away from Coruscant, far from the debates of senators and the meditation chambers of Jedi masters, a child stolen from Dathomir had become something else entirely. The wind moved through ancient stone. The darkness gathered around red light. The weapon was ready. The galaxy simply did not know it yet. Why was Darth Maul so eager to reveal himself to the Jedi when his master's entire strategy depended on secrecy? The answer begins to emerge in the years immediately before 32 BBY. By this point, Maul had spent most of his life under Sidious's control. He had endured brutal physical conditioning, lightsaber training, and countless lessons designed to sharpen his hatred. Yet hatred is a dangerous fuel. It rarely remains contained. In the Marvel comic Darth Maul, we see an apprentice who grows increasingly frustrated by inactivity. He knows the Jedi are alive. He knows they are the ancient enemies of the Sith. And he cannot understand why he is forbidden from destroying them. Sidious repeatedly reminds him that patience is power, but patience never comes naturally to Maul. The galaxy that Maul observed from the shadows looked peaceful on the surface. The Republic still governed thousands of systems. Jedi Knights traveled between worlds, resolving disputes and protecting trade routes. Coruscant remained the brilliant center of galactic civilization, its skyline stretching kilometers into the clouds. Yet Sidious understood what few others could see. The Republic was weakening from within. Corruption infected the Senate. Major corporations gained extraordinary political influence. The Trade Federation controlled enormous shipping networks. The Sith Lord did not need to destroy the Republic with armies. He intended to let the Republic help destroy itself. During this period, Maul undertook missions that exposed him to the criminal underworld of the galaxy. He moved among smugglers, bounty hunters, gangsters, and black market dealers. Canon sources show that he was already operating as an assassin and enforcer long before the Phantom Menace. These assignments served practical purposes. They tested his abilities. They taught him how power functioned outside official institutions. More importantly, they kept him hidden. A Jedi might investigate a mysterious criminal death. A Jedi would not necessarily suspect that a Sith apprentice stood behind it. One fascinating aspect of Maul's early life is how isolated he remained. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant housed thousands of years of knowledge, Padawans trained alongside friends and rivals. Clone troopers would later develop loyalty to their brothers. Even Sith in older legend stories often formed temporary alliances. Maul experienced none of this. His world revolved almost entirely around Sidious. There were no close companions, no meaningful friendships, no community. Looking back across his life, you can already see the loneliness that would haunt him long after his master abandoned him. Why did Sidious encourage that isolation instead of building loyalty through affection? Because affection creates independence. A student who forms deep connections might one day value those connections more than the master. The Sith tradition discouraged such attachments. Sidious wanted obedience. He wanted focus. He wanted a weapon that would strike exactly where directed. Every lesson pushed Maul toward that outcome. His identity became inseparable from his mission. He did not dream of ruling planets. He did not seek wealth. He sought purpose, and Sidious convinced him that purpose meant serving the Sith. Among the most distinctive symbols of that purpose was Maul's lightsaber. Unlike the single-bladed weapons carried by most Jedi, Maul wielded a double-bladed saber, powered by two crimson plasma blades extending from either end of a central hilt. The weapon reflected ancient Sith designs seen thousands of years earlier. Its effectiveness relied on unpredictability. Opponents accustomed to traditional lightsaber combat suddenly faced attacks from multiple directions. The spinning staff-like motions could overwhelm defenders and control large areas of space. By the eve of the Phantom Menace, Maul had transformed that weapon into an extension of his own body. The final stage of Sidious's plan began with a political crisis. In 32 BBY, the Trade Federation established a blockade around the peaceful world of Naboo. Publicly, the dispute concerned taxation of trade routes. Secretly, the blockade was engineered by Darth Sidious himself. While operating under his political identity as Senator Palpatine of Naboo, Sidious manipulated both sides of the conflict. Queen Padme Amidala suddenly found her world trapped. The Supreme Chancellor, Finis Valorum, appeared unable to respond effectively. Everything unfolded exactly as Sidious intended. When two Jedi arrived to negotiate with the Trade Federation, the situation changed. Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn and his Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi boarded the Federation command ship expecting diplomacy. Instead, they encountered betrayal. The Federation leadership attempted to eliminate them. Forced to escape, the Jedi traveled to Naboo's surface and became involved in Queen Amidala's efforts to break the blockade. For Sidious, this complication required direct action. The Jedi had entered the game. The Sith apprentice would have to move as well. Maul's first appearance in the film occurs after Queen Amidala flees Naboo and journeys toward Coruscant. Damage to her royal starship forces an unscheduled stop on Tatooine, a remote desert world in the Outer Rim. Tatooine lay beyond Republic jurisdiction. The planet was controlled largely by the Hutt crime families. Moisture farmers struggled beneath twin suns. Traders and smugglers crowded settlements such as Mos Espa. Here fate brought together several figures whose lives would reshape the galaxy. Padme Amidala arrived. Qui-Gon Jinn arrived. Obi-Wan Kenobi remained aboard ship. And a young slave named Anakin Skywalker entered the story. Why did Sidious send Maul personally to Tatooine? At first glance, it seems excessive. The Queen was stranded on an isolated world. The Trade Federation possessed resources throughout the region, Yet Sidious chose his apprentice. That decision reveals how important the situation had become. Amidala's survival threatened the larger plan. If she reached Coruscant and exposed the invasion, events could become unpredictable. Maul was dispatched to ensure control. For the first time in centuries, a Sith operative would actively hunt Jedi in the open. The encounter in Mos Espa lasted only moments, yet its significance echoes throughout galactic history. Qui-Gon had just departed Anakin's home when a cloaked rider approached on a speeder. Without warning, the stranger ignited a red lightsaber. The color alone carried enormous meaning. Jedi lightsabers commonly burned blue, green, or occasionally other hues. Red blades belonged to the Sith. Qui-Gon immediately understood the danger. A brief duel erupted among the dusty streets beyond the settlement. Then Maul withdrew as quickly as he had appeared. The fight raised disturbing questions. Qui-Gon reported the encounter after reaching Coruscant. Members of the Jedi Council listened carefully. Masters, including Mace Windu and Yoda, considered the implications. The Sith were believed extinct. Yet Qui-Gon remained convinced that the warrior on Tatooine had been a Sith. The Council hesitated. They did not dismiss his concerns, but neither did they fully grasp what was unfolding. From the audience's perspective, the irony is painful. The greatest threat in the galaxy sat inside the Senate itself, while the Jedi searched elsewhere. As Queen Amidala's political struggle continued on Coruscant, Maul waited. He had finally crossed blades with a Jedi. The years of preparation were ending. The secrecy of the Sith Order was beginning to crack. Soon he would receive another mission. Soon he would stand face to face with Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi once again. And when that meeting came beneath the skies of Naboo, the entire course of Star Wars history would shift in a matter of minutes. Why did the first Sith warrior the Jedi encountered in 1,000 years vanish almost immediately after announcing his existence? The answer lies in one of the most famous sequences in Star Wars history. By the time Queen Amidala returned to Naboo, events were accelerating on multiple fronts. The Trade Federation had occupied the planet. Federation battleships remained in orbit. Armored multi-troop transports rolled across the grassy plains. Battle droids secured key cities. Amidala, having failed to gain meaningful help from the Senate, chose a different path. She returned home with a small force that included Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Captain Panaka, and the recently liberated Anakin Skywalker. Somewhere nearby, Darth Maul was waiting for them. Naboo itself provided a striking contrast to the darkness surrounding Maul. The planet's capital city, Theed, was known for elegant architecture, waterfalls, and bright stone structures rising above green landscapes. Yet beneath that beauty stretched deeper levels of danger. Vast energy generators powered the city. Long maintenance shafts disappeared into darkness. Ancient tensions between Naboo's human population and the native Gungans had only recently begun to heal. While Queen Amidala organized an alliance with Boss Nass and the Gungan Grand Army, Maul prepared for a different battle entirely. His concern was not politics. His concern was the Jedi. The Battle of Naboo unfolded across several fronts simultaneously. Gungan forces engaged the Trade Federation's droid army on the plains. Naboo pilots launched attacks against the Federation control ship in orbit. Queen Amidala led a strike team into Theed's palace. Amid the chaos, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi encountered the enemy they had been seeking. Darth Maul stepped forward and ignited both blades of his lightsaber. In that instant, uncertainty ended. The Sith had returned. Why does this duel remain so powerful even decades after its release? Partly because of its consequences. Many lightsaber battles are remembered for spectacle. This one altered the future of the galaxy. The duel began inside the palace complex, before moving through corridors and hangars deep within Naboo's infrastructure. Maul fought with extraordinary aggression. His double-bladed lightsaber forced Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan to adapt constantly. The younger Obi-Wan was skilled, but he lacked the experience of his master. Qui-Gon, meanwhile, was already one of the Order's most respected Jedi. Together they represented centuries of Jedi tradition. Maul stood alone against both. The environment itself became part of the fight. Energy barriers activated and deactivated along the route, temporarily separating the combatants. During one pause, Qui-Gon sat quietly in meditation, while Maul paced like a caged predator behind a glowing force field. The contrast reveals much about both men. Qui-Gon sought calm. Maul drew strength from fury. One trusted the living force, the other trusted hatred. Their philosophies were as different as their fighting styles. When the final stage of the duel arrived, the battle narrowed. Obi-Wan became trapped behind energy barriers, while Qui-Gon faced Maul alone. What followed lasted only moments. Maul exploited an opening and struck Qui-Gon through the torso with his lightsaber. The Jedi Master collapsed. After years of preparation, after decades of secrecy, Darth Maul had achieved the Sith's first major victory against the Jedi Order in generations. One of the Republic's finest Jedi lay dying on the floor of a reactor complex beneath Theed. And for many viewers, the tragedy of Qui-Gon's death becomes even greater when viewed through later canon. Qui-Gon was the Jedi who discovered Anakin Skywalker on Tatooine. He believed Anakin was the chosen one spoken of in prophecy. He argued passionately before the Jedi Council that the boy deserved training. Had Qui-Gon survived, Anakin's future might have unfolded differently. That remains speculation, not canon fact, but it is one of the most enduring questions in Star Wars. The death of a single Jedi Master echoes through every era that follows. Yet Maul's victory lasted only seconds. Obi-Wan Kenobi finally broke free and launched himself back into the fight. The young Padawan attacked with intensity born from grief and shock. Even so, Maul initially controlled the engagement. He disarmed Obi-Wan and knocked him into a reactor shaft. Suddenly, the duel appeared finished. Obi-Wan clung to a small projection above a seemingly endless drop. His lightsaber was gone. Qui-Gon was dead. Maul stood above him in triumph. From any reasonable perspective, the Sith apprentice had won. Then everything changed. Drawing upon the Force, Obi-Wan leapt upward from the shaft. As he passed Maul, he seized Qui-Gon's fallen lightsaber and struck. The blue blade cut directly through Maul's torso. The Sith apprentice was severed at the waist and sent falling into the darkness below. Moments earlier, he had appeared unstoppable. Now he vanished into the abyss. The duel ended. The Jedi survived. The reactor shaft swallowed the body. Or at least, that is what everyone believed. Why did nobody question Maul's death? The answer is surprisingly simple. There was no reason to. The injury was catastrophic. The fall itself seemed unsurvivable. Even viewers in 1999 naturally assumed the character was gone forever. Within the story, the Jedi had larger concerns. Qui-Gon Jinn had died. Naboo needed rebuilding. Chancellor Valorum had been removed from office. Senator Palpatine was about to become Supreme Chancellor of the Republic. Life moved forward. Darth Maul became a memory. Yet his apparent death produced consequences almost immediately. On Coruscant, the Jedi Council discussed what had happened. Mace Windu and Yoda recognized the significance of the Sith's return. A famous question emerged from their conversation. Was the slain warrior the master or the apprentice? The audience already knew the answer. Sidious remained alive. But the Jedi did not yet understand how deeply he had infiltrated the Republic. Even in victory, they were already falling behind. Meanwhile, Palpatine's rise continued unchecked. The crisis on Naboo transformed him from senator to supreme chancellor. To ordinary citizens, he appeared compassionate and capable. To the Jedi, he seemed trustworthy enough. To the audience, the truth was obvious. Darth Sidious had orchestrated the conflict from the beginning. He had sacrificed an apprentice, manipulated a planetary invasion, and secured political power all at once. The death of Darth Maul looked like a setback. In reality, Sidious had achieved nearly everything he wanted. For years afterward, Maul's story seemed finished. Obi-Wan continued his training of Anakin Skywalker, honoring Qui-Gon's final wish. The Republic entered a new era. Separatist tensions gradually increased. Count Dooku emerged as a political and ideological opponent of the Republic. The Clone Wars drew closer. Through all of it, nobody searched for Darth Maul. Nobody expected to find him. His name faded into history. And somewhere far from Coruscant, far from Naboo, and far from the attention of both Jedi and Sith, something impossible was happening. Deep in the darkness, beyond known battlefields and famous worlds, a creature that should have died was refusing to let go. The reactor shaft had not claimed him. The years ahead would reveal a truth far stranger than anyone imagined. Darth Maul's greatest battle had not been against Qui-Gon Jinn or Obi-Wan Kenobi. It was the battle to survive. How could Darth Maul survive wounds that should have killed him instantly? Among all the remarkable survivals in Star Wars canon, few are as shocking as Maul's. When the Clone Wars revealed the truth years later, many viewers initially assumed the explanation came from Legends material or later retcons. Yet the survival itself became firmly established in canon. After being cut in half by Obi-Wan Kenobi in 32 BBY and falling into Naboo's reactor system, Maul somehow lived. The physical injury was catastrophic. The psychological damage proved even worse. The Sith apprentice who emerged from that fall would barely resemble the warrior who entered it. Canon never provides a minute-by-minute account of his escape from Naboo. What it does establish is that Maul eventually drifted through the galaxy and arrived on the junk world of Lotho Minor. Located in the Outer Rim, Lotho Minor served as a dumping ground for industrial waste and scrap. Mountains of twisted metal stretched across its surface. Mechanical debris accumulated over decades. Toxic environments and dangerous creatures made survival difficult even for healthy inhabitants. For someone who had lost half his body, it should have been impossible. Yet impossibility had already become part of Maul's story. The dark side of the Force played a central role in his survival. Throughout Star Wars, the dark side grants users extraordinary endurance, though often at terrible personal cost. We see examples in characters such as Darth Vader, who survives injuries that would kill ordinary beings. We later see Darth Sidious preserve himself through unnatural means. Maul's case was different. He did not survive because of advanced medical treatment or carefully designed cybernetics. He survived because his hatred refused to let him die. Hatred became nourishment. Hatred became purpose. Hatred became the thread holding together a shattered mind. Years passed. Not months, not a brief recovery. Nearly a decade separated the Battle of Naboo from Maul's rediscovery during the Clone Wars. During those lost years, the galaxy changed dramatically. Anakin Skywalker grew from a child into a Jedi Knight. Count Dooku left the Jedi Order and became Darth Tyrannus. The Clone Wars erupted between the Galactic Republic and the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Entire star systems burned. Millions died. Yet while history unfolded, Maul remained hidden among mountains of scrap, forgotten by almost everyone who had ever known him. Why didn't Darth Sidious search for his apprentice? The question reveals something important about the Sith. Sidious valued usefulness above loyalty. Once Maul appeared dead, he moved on. Count Dooku became his new apprentice. The larger plan continued without interruption. There is no indication in canon that Sidious spent years mourning Maul or attempting to recover him. To the future Emperor, apprentices were tools. Some lasted longer than others. If one broke, another could be found. The cold practicality of that attitude helps explain why Maul's eventual return carried so much emotional weight. He had survived not only physical destruction but abandonment. The Maul who existed on Lotho Minor scarcely resembled the disciplined warrior from the Phantom Menace. By the time we first see him again in the Clone Wars, his mind has deteriorated severely. He mutters to himself. He relives old memories. He becomes trapped in endless cycles of rage and obsession. The image is unsettling. Massive mechanical appendages have replaced his missing lower body, giving him the appearance of a monstrous spider. The once elegant Sith assassin now lurks among shadows and refuse. The transformation feels less like a resurrection and more like a haunting. Yet even in madness, one memory remained clear. Obi-Wan Kenobi. The name survived everything else. Through years of isolation, pain, and psychological collapse, Maul never released his hatred for the Jedi who defeated him. In many ways, that obsession preserved him. The dark side feeds on powerful emotions. Revenge became the center of his existence. Every humiliation, every moment of suffering, every memory of Naboo flowed toward a single target. By the time the Clone Wars reached their later stages, Maul no longer lived for the Sith cause, he lived for vengeance. His rediscovery began on Dathomir. Around 21 BBY, Mother Talzin remained engaged in her own struggles against Count Dooku and Darth Sidious. During these events, she turned her attention toward another Night Brother, Savage Opress. Through Night Sister magic, Savage was transformed into a powerful warrior and eventually manipulated into serving Dooku. That arrangement did not last. After conflicts with Dooku and Asajj Ventress, Savage found himself without clear direction. It was then that Talzin revealed a secret that changed everything. He had a brother, and that brother was still alive. Why did Talzin wait so long before trying to find Maul? Canon never gives a direct answer, which leaves room for interpretation. Talzin had spent years navigating conflicts, involving Dooku, Ventress, Sidious, and the Night Sisters themselves. She may not have known Maul survived until later. She may have lacked the ability to reach him, or she may have believed the timing mattered. Whatever the reason, she eventually sent Savage Opress into the Outer Rim with a mission unlike any he had previously received. He was to locate the lost apprentice. The search led to Lotho Minor. The world presented a nightmare landscape of rusting machinery and endless waste fields. There, among wreckage and darkness, Savage discovered the creature that had once been Darth Maul. The reunion is one of the most haunting moments in the Clone Wars. Maul emerges not as a triumphant Sith Lord, but as a broken being. His speech is fragmented. His thoughts drift between past and present. Memories of Obi-Wan surface repeatedly. The sight shocks even Savage. He had expected a warrior. Instead, he found a ghost. Yet beneath the madness, the old Maul remained. The intelligence was still there. The fury was still there. Most importantly, the will to survive remained stronger than ever. Savage brought his brother back to Dathomir, where Mother Talzin used Night Sister magic to heal his fractured mind. The process did not erase his pain. It did not restore the years he had lost, but it returned clarity. It gave structure to his thoughts. It transformed him from a monster hiding in a junkyard into something far more dangerous. When the healing ended, Maul received new cybernetic legs to replace the crude mechanical limbs he had used for survival. His mind sharpened. His memories returned. His identity reassembled itself piece by piece. The Clone Wars still raged across the galaxy. Darth Sidious continued manipulating both sides of the conflict. Obi-Wan Kenobi served as one of the Republic's most celebrated generals. And now, after nearly 10 years of presumed death, Darth Maul stepped back into the galaxy. The weapon had returned. Only now it was no longer loyal to the hand that forged it. What did Darth Maul want more? Revenge against Obi-Wan Kenobi or revenge against the master who discarded him? When Maul returned to the galaxy around 21 BBY, even he may not have known the answer. The years on Lotho Minor had reduced his world to a single obsession: Obi-Wan. Yet once clarity returned, larger truths became impossible to ignore. Darth Sidious had abandoned him. The Sith grand plan had continued without him. Count Dooku now occupied the position that had once belonged to him. For the first time in his life, Maul stood outside the structure that had defined him. He was no longer truly a Sith apprentice, but he was not free either. The Clone Wars provided the perfect backdrop for his return. By this stage of the conflict, the Republic and the Confederacy of Independent Systems were locked in a galaxy-spanning struggle. Clone troopers fought battle droids on hundreds of worlds. Jedi generals commanded armies across the stars. Entire sectors changed hands. Amid such chaos, one resurrected Sith warrior could move through the shadows without immediately drawing galactic attention. Maul understood this. Unlike the reckless predator of his youth, he had learned patience through suffering. His first major objective was simple: find Obi-Wan Kenobi. The search led him through a series of violent encounters during the Clone Wars. Together with Savage Opress, Maul launched attacks designed specifically to draw Kenobi into the open. These operations were not military campaigns. They were bait. Every raid, every act of brutality, Every calculated atrocity served a single purpose. Maul wanted Obi-Wan to suffer, not merely to die. Suffering mattered more. The years trapped in isolation had transformed revenge into something deeply personal. One of the earliest confrontations occurred on Raydonia. There, Maul and Savage deliberately created a crisis that forced Obi-Wan to respond. The resulting encounters revealed something important about Maul's evolution. He remained extraordinarily dangerous in combat, but now he also embraced psychological warfare. He studied fears. He exploited emotions. He understood that pain could be inflicted long before a lightsaber was drawn. The apprentice who once relied primarily on physical skill had become far more calculating. Why did Maul fixate so intensely on Obi-Wan when Sidious had caused him greater harm? The question sits at the center of his character. Rationally, Sidious betrayed him. Sidious replaced him. Sidious abandoned him. Yet Obi-Wan delivered the visible wound. Obi-Wan represented the moment his life shattered. Human beings and Sith often direct their rage toward the nearest symbol of their suffering rather than its deepest cause. Maul knew Sidious was responsible for much of his fate. But when he relived Naboo in his mind, it was Obi-Wan's face he saw. The conflict escalated dramatically. During one encounter, Jedi Master Adi Gallia joined Obi-Wan in confronting the brothers. Adi Gallia was an experienced member of the Jedi Council and a veteran of countless missions. The battle demonstrated just how dangerous Savage and Maul had become together. During the fighting, Savage Opress killed Adi Gallia, one of the most significant Jedi deaths directly attributed to Maul's circle. The event shocked the Jedi Order. What had initially seemed like the return of a single rogue enemy was becoming something larger. At the same time, Maul's ambitions began expanding beyond revenge. This shift is one of the most important developments in his life. Earlier versions of Maul existed almost entirely as instruments of others. First he served Sidious, then he served vengeance. But as the Clone Wars continued, a new idea emerged. Why chase individual enemies forever when the galaxy itself was vulnerable? Republic institutions were stretched thin. Criminal syndicates operated across countless systems. The separatist conflict created opportunities everywhere. For the first time, Maul started imagining power on his own terms. His growing confidence can be seen in the way he spoke. The broken, fragmented speech patterns from Lotho Minor faded away. The disciplined intellect beneath the rage reasserted itself. He became strategic, patient, visionary in a dark and dangerous sense. The transformation was striking. The same individual who once hid among junk piles now spoke about reshaping criminal empires. Survival had taught him something unexpected. Dependence on a master led only to betrayal. Meanwhile, Mother Talzin continued influencing events from Dathomir. Her conflict with Count Dooku intensified. The Night Sisters suffered devastating losses after Dooku and General Grievous launched attacks against them. Dathomir itself became a battlefield. Many Night Sisters perished. Talzin survived, but her position weakened. These events mattered deeply to Maul. Although his life had been defined by the Sith, Dathomir remained part of his identity. The destruction of the Night Sisters added another layer to his growing hatred of Sidious and his agents. Why did Maul succeed where so many dark side users failed? Part of the answer lies in adaptability. Count Dooku remained dependent upon Sidious's approval. General Grievous relied on military power. Many Sith throughout history pursued domination through direct conquest. Maul learned a different lesson from his years of suffering. He learned how to survive without armies, governments, or institutions. He could operate in shadows. He could rebuild from nothing. He could lose everything and continue moving. These qualities made him uniquely dangerous during the unstable years of the Clone Wars. As his plans matured, Maul began looking beyond isolated acts of revenge. He studied the underworld. He examined the major criminal organizations operating across the galaxy. Black Sun controlled enormous resources. The Pike Syndicate dominated spice trafficking routes. The Hutt clans maintained influence across vast regions of the Outer Rim. Most observers viewed these groups as separate entities. Maul saw potential pieces of a larger structure. The galaxy's governments were busy fighting one another. Criminal networks offered a different path to power. Obi-Wan Kenobi remained a target, but he was no longer the only target. Something fundamental had changed. The former Sith apprentice had stopped thinking solely about the past. He was beginning to think about the future. Not the future Sidious designed, not the future envisioned by the Republic or the Separatists. His own future. For the first time since childhood, Darth Maul was attempting to become the author of his destiny rather than merely its victim. And somewhere deep within that ambition, a dangerous realization was taking shape. Revenge could wound his enemies, power could challenge them. If he truly wanted to strike at Sidious, he would need far more than anger. He would need an empire of his own. How did a discarded Sith apprentice accomplish something neither the Republic nor the Separatists could achieve and place Mandalore under his control? The answer begins not with armies, but with criminals. Around 20 BBY, Maul recognized a truth that many galactic leaders overlooked. Governments rose and fell. Wars consumed resources. Political alliances shifted constantly. The underworld endured. Crime syndicates operated across hyperspace routes, ignored national borders, and accumulated vast wealth. If Maul wanted influence quickly, he did not need to conquer sectors one planet at a time. He needed to unite forces that already existed. The strategy reflected a level of political thinking few would have associated with the warrior from Naboo. His first major step was the creation of the Shadow Collective. The organization brought together multiple criminal powers under Maul's leadership. Among them were the Pike Syndicate, influential across major spice trafficking routes. Black Sun, one of the largest criminal organizations in the galaxy, also became involved. Other groups joined as well, either through negotiation, intimidation, or outright violence. Maul understood something Sidious had always understood. Power grows faster when others do the work for you. Instead of acting alone, he created a network. Instead of pursuing isolated revenge, he began building an empire. Not everyone accepted his authority willingly. One of the most memorable demonstrations of Maul's new approach occurred during his confrontation with Black Sun leadership. When resistance emerged, Maul responded with overwhelming brutality. He executed leaders personally and made it clear that refusal carried consequences. These scenes reveal an important evolution in his character. Earlier in life, Maul had often acted as a weapon directed by someone else. Now he wielded power directly. He made decisions, he set objectives, He demanded obedience. The apprentice had become a ruler. Why did Mandalore become the focus of his ambitions? To understand that decision, you must understand what Mandalore represented during the Clone Wars. Once home to legendary warriors feared throughout the galaxy, Mandalore had undergone dramatic transformation under Duchess Satine Kryze. Satine pursued neutrality and pacifism. She sought to move Mandalore away from its violent past. The capital city of Sundari reflected this vision. Enclosed beneath massive protective domes, it stood as a symbol of stability amid galactic war. Yet beneath the surface, opposition was growing. That opposition took the form of Death Watch. Led by Pre Vizsla, Death Watch rejected Satine's reforms. Its members believed Mandalore had abandoned its true identity. They wanted to restore traditional warrior culture and reclaim political authority. For years, Death Watch operated as a militant insurgent movement. They possessed skilled fighters, advanced equipment, and deep resentment toward the current government. What they lacked was a path to victory. Maul provided one. The alliance between Maul and Pre Vizsla was always fragile. Both men desired power. Both believed they could manipulate the other. Initially, however, their interests aligned. Together, they devised a plan to destabilize Mandalore from within. Criminal forces associated with the Shadow Collective began generating chaos across the planet. Citizens who had grown accustomed to peace suddenly faced rising violence. Fear spread. Confidence in Satine's government weakened. Death Watch then positioned itself as the solution. The strategy was elegant in its cruelty. First create the crisis, then offer protection from it. The plan worked. Public trust collapsed rapidly. Death Watch forces appeared capable of restoring order where official authorities seemed powerless. Satine's government faltered. Political pressure intensified. Mandalore moved toward exactly the outcome Maul desired. Yet even at this stage, many observers assumed Pre Vizsla would ultimately remain in control. Death Watch was his movement. Mandalore was his goal. Maul appeared to be an ally. That assumption proved disastrously wrong. Why did Pre Vizsla underestimate Maul? Perhaps because he saw only a useful partner. Perhaps because he believed Mandalorian traditions would guarantee loyalty from his followers. Or perhaps because he misunderstood the nature of Sith ambition. Once Satine was removed from power and Death Watch secured victory, Vizsla attempted to dispose of Maul and Savage Opress. He expected compliance. Instead, he received a challenge. Maul invoked an ancient Mandalorian principle. Leadership could be decided through combat. The duel that followed became one of the defining moments of Maul's life. Pre Vizsla was no ordinary opponent. He wielded the Darksaber, the legendary black-bladed weapon created centuries earlier by Tara Vizsla, the first Mandalorian inducted into the Jedi Order. Vizsla was highly trained, heavily armored, and experienced in combat, yet Maul proved superior. Their battle combined lightsaber skill, hand-to-hand combat, and sheer determination. In the end, Maul defeated him and claimed victory. Then he executed him. That single act transformed the political landscape. By Mandalorian tradition, Maul had won fairly. Many members of Death Watch accepted the result. Others struggled with the reality of following an outsider. Nevertheless, power shifted. The former Sith apprentice now controlled not only the Shadow Collective, but effectively ruled Mandalore itself. Official authority passed through Prime Minister Almec, who served as a puppet administrator. Behind the scenes, Maul directed events. The Republic remained distracted by the Clone Wars. The Separatists faced their own challenges. Few realized what had happened until it was already accomplished. For a brief period, Maul achieved something extraordinary. He possessed territory. He possessed armies. He possessed wealth. He commanded loyalty from criminal syndicates and Mandalorian warriors alike. Looking across his life, this may have been the closest he ever came to genuine success. He was no longer merely surviving, he was building. For the first time since childhood, he had created a power structure that belonged entirely to him. No master stood above him, no chains remained visible. Yet success brought visibility. The larger Maul's influence grew, the harder it became to hide. Criminal networks reported to him. Mandalorian politics revolved around him. Entire organizations moved according to his decisions. Somewhere far away, Darth Sidious watched events unfold. The former apprentice whom everyone believed dead had not only survived, he had gathered followers, conquered a strategically important world, and begun shaping galactic events independently. And that was something Sidious could never tolerate. For years, Maul had feared his former master. Then he hated him. Now, perhaps for the first time, he'd become important enough to attract Sidious's full attention. The ruler of Mandalore sat at the height of his power, surrounded by warriors and allies. But in the shadows between stars, another figure was already moving toward him. One carried a red lightsaber, the other carried the future of the Sith itself. Their reunion would end in blood. What frightened Darth Sidious enough to leave the Clone Wars behind and personally confront his former apprentice? The answer reveals just how far Maul had risen. Throughout the Clone Wars, Sidious rarely acted directly. He preferred manipulation. He moved pieces across the board from the shadows while Count Dooku, General Grievous, Separatist leaders, senators, Jedi, and clone armies unknowingly served his larger design. Yet Maul's growing influence represented a different kind of threat. He understood too much. He knew the methods of the Sith. He knew how Sidious thought. And unlike the Jedi, he had no illusions about the darkness hidden beneath the Republic. The confrontation came on Mandalore. One day, without warning, Darth Sidious arrived personally. The scene remains one of the most chilling moments in the Clone Wars. There was no vast fleet, no declaration of war, no lengthy campaign. Sidious simply appeared. His confidence revealed everything. The future emperor did not view Maul's kingdom as an equal rival. He viewed it as a problem requiring correction, and he intended to solve it himself. At first, Maul and Savage Opress faced him together. The image carries enormous symbolic weight. For years, Maul had struggled to reclaim power. He had survived death, built an empire, gathered followers, conquered Mandalore. Yet when his former master finally stood before him, he immediately understood the danger. The old fear returned. The old hierarchy returned. Beneath the ruler, the conqueror, and the crime lord still lived the apprentice who remembered Sidious's strength. Even after everything he had accomplished, part of him remained the child molded on Dathomir. Why did Maul choose to fight when he understood he was outmatched? Perhaps because there was no alternative. Escape would mean surrendering everything he had built. Submission would return him to slavery. Maul had spent years clawing his way back from oblivion. Whatever happened next, he would face it standing. Savage shared that determination. Together they ignited their lightsabers and confronted the Dark Lord of the Sith. What followed demonstrated the terrifying gap between Sidious and almost everyone else in the galaxy. The duel was not truly a contest. Sidious moved with frightening speed and precision. His mastery of lightsaber combat surpassed anything Maul and Savage could match together. The future Emperor laughed during portions of the battle, a detail that makes the encounter even more unsettling. He was not merely winning, he was enjoying himself. Years of planning, manipulation, and dark side mastery had elevated him to a level few beings could challenge. For all their power, Maul and Savage remained apprentices confronting a master. The fight ended in tragedy. Savage Opress fell first. Sidious struck him down during the duel, mortally wounding him. As Savage died, the monstrous enhancements imposed upon him by Night Sister magic faded away. For a brief moment, the warrior who had terrorized worlds appeared vulnerable and almost peaceful. Maul witnessed his brother's death helplessly. Throughout his life, meaningful relationships had been rare. Savage was not merely an ally, he was family. His loss reopened wounds that stretched all the way back to Dathomir. Then Maul faced Sidious alone. The result was inevitable. Sidious defeated him and brought him to his knees. Yet something fascinating happened during their exchange. Sidious did not kill him. Instead, he spoke of future uses and future plans. This decision has inspired years of discussion among fans. Why spare Maul after eliminating Savage? The answer eventually emerged through later canon material. Sidious understood that Maul remained connected to Mother Talzin. Through him, opportunities still existed. A dead enemy has no utility. A captured one can become a weapon. Why didn't Sidious consider Maul a true Sith anymore? Because from the perspective of Sith tradition, Maul had already failed. The rule of two allowed only a master and an apprentice. Once Sidious replaced him with Count Dooku, Maul ceased occupying that role. He could still use Sith techniques. He could still draw upon the dark side. But institutionally, he stood outside the line of succession. This distinction mattered enormously. Maul viewed himself as a wronged apprentice. Sidious viewed him as a former asset. The story continued in the canon comic Son of Dathomir, which adapts narrative plans originally intended for unfinished episodes of the Clone Wars. There, Maul's capture becomes part of a larger conflict involving Mother Talzin, Count Dooku, General Grievous, and the criminal organizations still loyal to him. The comic fills an important gap between his defeat on Mandalore and his later appearances. Without it, some of Maul's subsequent movements appear abrupt. With it, the continuity becomes much clearer. Maul eventually escaped captivity, but the cost was severe. The Shadow Collective fractured, allies died, resources vanished. Mother Talzin became increasingly endangered. Throughout these events, Maul repeatedly demonstrated the trait that defines his entire life: persistence. Again and again, larger powers crushed him. Again and again, he rebuilt. Most villains in Star Wars rise, fall, and disappear. Maul rises, falls, rises again, and falls again. The cycle becomes almost mythic. Survival itself evolves into his defining talent. The conflict ultimately reached Dathomir. There, forces aligned with Sidious launched operations against Mother Talzin. General Grievous played a significant role in these battles. The planet that had shaped Maul's origins once more became a battlefield. Talzin fought with extraordinary power, drawing upon abilities unlike those used by either Jedi or Sith, yet even she could not overcome the combined pressure exerted by Sidious and his agents. Her influence diminished permanently. For Maul, the loss carried profound emotional consequences. Why does Maul's story begin to feel increasingly tragic after this point? Because his victories never remain victories. Each achievement slips away. Naboo ends in defeat. Survival leads to madness. Revenge brings temporary satisfaction, but no peace. Mandalore falls. Savage dies. Talzin falls. Every time Maul reaches for stability, the galaxy takes it from him. Yet he never abandons the struggle. That refusal commands a strange kind of respect even when his actions remain cruel and destructive. As the Clone Wars approached their final days, Maul found himself in an unusual position. He was no longer Sidious's apprentice. He was not a separatist leader. He was not part of the Republic. He stood outside nearly every major institution in the galaxy. That isolation gave him a perspective few others possessed. While Jedi generals fought battles and senators argued politics, Maul saw patterns emerging beneath the surface. He knew Sidious better than almost anyone alive. And because of that knowledge, he began noticing something terrifying. The Clone Wars were nearing their conclusion. Events were moving exactly as Sidious wanted. The Republic was weakening. The Jedi were distracted. Count Dooku had served his purpose. A larger transformation approached. While billions remained unaware, Maul could sense the shape of the trap closing around the galaxy. The final act of the Republic was beginning, and Darth Maul, for all his flaws, was one of the very few people who recognized it before it happened. Why was Darth Maul one of the only major figures in the galaxy who correctly understood that the Republic was about to die? The answer emerges during the final months of the Clone Wars. By 19 BBY, nearly every major player remained focused on the visible conflict between the Republic and the Separatists. Jedi generals commanded clone armies across countless battlefronts. Count Dooku continued serving as the public face of the Separatist leadership. Chancellor Palpatine appeared increasingly indispensable to the Republic war effort. To most observers, victory or defeat depended upon military outcomes. Maul understood something different. He knew the war itself was the deception. This knowledge drew him back to Mandalore. Despite earlier defeats, Maul had re-established influence on the planet. His control was not as absolute as before, but he remained a significant force. More importantly, he recognized that events were accelerating toward a conclusion. Sidious was moving pieces into their final positions. The Clone Wars could not continue indefinitely. Something larger waited beyond them. Maul did not know every detail of the plan, yet he knew enough to fear it. One of the most fascinating aspects of Maul's character appears here. Unlike the Jedi Council, he had no ideological blinders regarding Sidious. Unlike the Separatists, he was not being manipulated through promises of political reform. Unlike the Senate, he was not distracted by procedure and bureaucracy. Maul understood the Sith mindset because he had been raised within it. He recognized patterns that others missed That perspective made him uniquely dangerous during the final days of the Republic. Why did Maul lure Ahsoka Tano to Mandalore instead of simply avoiding conflict? Because he believed she could become an ally. At this point, Ahsoka occupied an unusual position herself. She was no longer a member of the Jedi Order. After being falsely accused and abandoned by many within the institution she had served, she had chosen her own path. Maul understood alienation. He understood betrayal. In some ways, their experiences mirrored one another, despite their vastly different moral choices. When he learned of her presence during the siege of Mandalore, he saw an opportunity. The siege of Mandalore began when Republic forces launched an operation to remove Maul from power. Clone troopers from the 501st Legion participated under the command structure associated with Ahsoka and Captain Rex. For Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the Republic, the operation represented one mission among many. For Maul, it represented something else entirely. He believed the endgame had arrived. Every decision suddenly carried enormous significance. When Ahsoka finally confronted him, one of the most revealing conversations in Star Wars canon unfolded. Maul spoke openly about Darth Sidious. He warned her that the Republic was already doomed. He explained that the Clone Wars existed as part of a larger design. Most importantly, he focused on Anakin Skywalker. This detail remains remarkable. While countless Jedi served throughout the war, Maul understood that Anakin occupied a central role in Sidious's plans. He did not know every detail. He did not yet know the name Darth Vader. Yet he recognized the danger. The scene gains power because viewers already know what is coming. Ahsoka listens carefully but remains skeptical. From her perspective, Maul remains a manipulative enemy responsible for immense suffering. Trusting him would be extraordinarily difficult, yet hidden within his warnings lies genuine insight. He is not attempting to save the Republic out of compassion. He is attempting to disrupt Sidious's victory. Even so, many of his observations prove accurate. The Sith Lord truly is orchestrating events. Anakin truly stands at the center of the plan. The Jedi truly are walking into catastrophe. Why didn't Maul simply tell Ahsoka everything he knew? Partly because he did not know everything. Sidious revealed information selectively throughout his career. Even trusted apprentices rarely possessed a complete picture. Maul understood the architecture of the trap, but not every mechanism within it. He sensed Anakin's importance without fully comprehending why. He recognized approaching disaster without knowing the exact trigger. This uncertainty adds realism to the story. Maul was perceptive, not omniscient. The confrontation eventually became physical. Ahsoka and Maul engaged in one of the most visually striking lightsaber duels in modern Star Wars. Their battle moved across the cityscape of Sundari. They fought among support beams, rooftops, and elevated structures suspended above Mandalore's domed capital. Maul fought with extraordinary skill, perhaps more focused than he had been in years. Ahsoka matched him through agility, discipline, and determination. The duel felt less like a battle between hero and villain, and more like two survivors colliding at the edge of history. In the end, Ahsoka prevailed. Maul was captured rather than killed. Mandalore fell under Republic control. Specialized containment measures secured the former Sith. At first glance, it seemed another defeat in a life filled with them. Yet events elsewhere in the galaxy were already overtaking everything happening on Mandalore. Chancellor Palpatine enacted the final stage of his plan. Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader. Order 66 activated across the clone army. The Republic collapsed. The Galactic Empire was born. Why does Order 66 affect Maul's story so differently from everyone else's? Because Maul experiences it as both victim and observer. Inside his containment chamber, he witnesses chaos spreading through the Republic forces transporting him. Clone troopers who had served loyally beside Jedi suddenly turn against them. Ahsoka and Rex struggle to survive. The carefully constructed structure of the Republic begins collapsing in real time. For most characters, Order 66 arrives as a shocking revelation. For Maul, it serves as confirmation. The disaster he anticipated has finally arrived. One of the most memorable sequences follows. Ahsoka eventually releases Maul during the crisis, not as an ally, but as a distraction. She needs chaos to create opportunities for escape. Maul immediately embraces the role. What happens next demonstrates the terrifying power he still possesses. Unarmed at first, he tears through portions of a Venator-class Star Destroyer using the Force alone. Blast doors crumple. Clone troopers fall. Entire sections of the ship descend into panic. It is a reminder that beneath years of suffering, Maul remains extraordinarily dangerous. Yet even here, survival remains his primary goal. He is not trying to save anyone. He is not fighting for a cause. The Republic is dying. The Jedi are being exterminated. Sidious has won. Maul simply intends to live through it. In a strange way, this makes him one of the few major figures who enters the Imperial era with complete clarity. He understands exactly who rules the galaxy. He understands exactly how that ruler achieved power. And he understands that confronting him directly would be suicide. When the Venator finally falls and burns, another chapter of galactic history ends. The Clone Wars are over. The Republic is gone. Count Dooku is dead. Most Jedi have been killed. Darth Vader now serves Sidious. Amid the wreckage, Maul escapes once more. No armies remain under his command. No throne awaits him. No victory belongs to him. Yet he survives again. And as the Empire rises across the stars, Darth Maul begins searching for a new place in a galaxy that no longer resembles the one he once tried to conquer. Why did Darth Maul stop pursuing galactic conquest and retreat into the shadows of crime, ancient ruins, and old obsessions? The answer begins in the aftermath of Order 66. By the end of the Clone Wars, Maul had lost nearly everything he had spent years building. Mandalore was gone. The Shadow Collective had fractured. Mother Talzin was dead. Savage Opress was dead. Sidious now ruled the galaxy openly through the Galactic Empire. Most importantly, Darth Vader existed. Whatever hopes Maul once harbored of challenging his former master directly had become almost impossible. The galaxy had changed, and Maul understood better than most how dangerous the New Order truly was. Yet he did not disappear. Canon reveals that during the Imperial era, Maul remained active through criminal networks and underworld connections. One of the most important pieces of evidence appears in Solo, a Star Wars story set around 10 BBY. There, Maul emerges unexpectedly as the hidden leader connected to Crimson Dawn, one of the most influential criminal syndicates operating beneath Imperial authority. The reveal lasts only moments on screen, yet it speaks volumes. Even after everything he had lost, Maul still possessed influence. He still commanded loyalty. He still understood how power moved through the galaxy's shadows. Crimson Dawn occupied a fascinating position within the Empire. The organization did not challenge Imperial fleets directly. It did not attempt open rebellion. Instead, it operated through smuggling, intelligence, coercion, and carefully maintained networks. Figures such as Dryden Voss served visible leadership roles, while larger forces remained hidden behind the scenes. This structure suited Maul perfectly. During the Clone Wars, he had learned that visibility attracted Sidious's attention. Survival often required remaining unseen. Criminal empires could thrive where political empires attracted destruction. Why would someone as ambitious as Maul settle for ruling a criminal syndicate? The question assumes he truly settled. Another interpretation exists. Maul had spent decades watching governments rise and fall. He had seen the Republic collapse. He had seen the Separatists destroyed. He had watched Mandalore change hands repeatedly. Criminal organizations, by contrast, often endured. They adapted. They infiltrated institutions rather than replacing them. Perhaps Maul no longer believed thrones mattered. Perhaps he had concluded that influence hidden beneath official power structures offered greater longevity. The fact that Crimson Dawn survived deep into the Imperial era suggests he may have been right. Through Crimson Dawn, Maul also maintained indirect connections to figures who would shape future events. Among them was Kira, whose role expanded significantly in later canon comics. Her relationship with Crimson Dawn became increasingly important after the events of Solo. Maul's presence during this era remains partly obscured, which creates fertile ground for interpretation. Canon establishes his influence but leaves many day-to-day details unexplored. We know he continued pursuing ancient knowledge, power, and opportunities. We simply do not see every step. What was Maul actually searching for during these years? The answer leads us toward Star Wars Rebels. By the time Maul appears in Rebels, much has changed. The Empire dominates the galaxy. The Rebel Alliance is beginning to emerge. Jedi are nearly extinct. Darth Vader hunts surviving Force users. In this environment, Maul becomes a strange figure. He is no longer a major political player. He is no longer a Sith apprentice. He is not a Jedi. He exists between categories driven by motives that even he struggles to define. When viewers encounter him on Malachor, the setting feels appropriate. Malachor is one of the most haunting worlds in Star Wars canon. Ancient ruins stretch across its surface. The remains of a long-forgotten conflict linger everywhere. Massive stone structures cast shadows across barren landscapes. Deep beneath the surface lies a Sith temple connected to devastating ancient weapons. It is a place shaped by history, loss, and ruin. In many ways, Malachor mirrors Maul himself. Here he encounters Ezra Bridger. The relationship between Maul and Ezra becomes one of the most fascinating dynamics in Rebels. Ezra is young, powerful, and uncertain about his future. Maul immediately recognizes potential. Throughout his life, he has repeatedly sought apprentices, partners, or successors. First Savage, then various followers and allies. Now Ezra. The pattern reveals a loneliness that often hides beneath his aggression. Again and again, Maul attempts to create connections, Again and again, those connections collapse. Why does Maul keep searching for apprentices despite constant betrayal? Because he understands isolation better than almost anyone. From childhood onward, meaningful relationships have been rare. Sidious used him, Savage died, Talzin died, followers abandoned him or were killed. Every empire he built eventually crumbled. Seeking an apprentice is not merely a quest for power. It is also a search for continuity. If someone understands him, perhaps his struggles gain meaning. If someone follows him, perhaps he is no longer alone. The tragedy is that Maul's methods make genuine trust nearly impossible. His interactions with Ezra revolve heavily around Sith holocrons and ancient knowledge. Holocrons function as repositories of information accessible through the Force. Jedi and Sith alike use them to preserve teachings across generations. Maul understands that knowledge can be as powerful as armies. Together, he and Ezra eventually use linked holocrons in an attempt to uncover answers. The process reveals fragmented visions and clues pointing towards something Maul has sought for years. Obi-Wan Kenobi. Even after decades, the obsession remains. This fact tells us something profound about Maul's psychology. He has survived Naboo, survived Lotho Minor, survived Sidious, survived the Clone Wars, survived Order 66. Yet the emotional wound inflicted by Obi-Wan still defines him. Many characters in Star Wars evolve beyond old grievances. Maul never truly does. The years change his circumstances. They do not change the core obsession. The clues from the holocrons eventually point toward a remote desert world. Twin suns. Endless sand. A forgotten corner of the Outer Rim. Tatooine. The same planet where Maul first crossed paths with Qui-Gon Jinn. The same world where Anakin Skywalker was born. The same world where Obi-Wan Kenobi has spent years in hiding. Fate has a habit of circling back upon itself in Star Wars, and Maul's story is no exception. After decades of conflict, survival, and wandering, his path begins narrowing toward a final destination. The galaxy around him continues changing. Rebels challenge the Empire. New heroes rise, new battles begin. Yet Maul's focus grows increasingly narrow. Entire governments no longer matter. Criminal empires no longer matter. Even Sidious begins fading into the background of his thoughts. Only one goal remains. Somewhere beyond the dunes of Tatooine, beneath the light of twin suns, the man who changed his life is waiting. And Darth Maul is finally moving toward the last confrontation of his long and restless journey. If you follow Darth Maul's life from beginning to end, a strange pattern emerges. At first glance, his story appears to be about power. He learns the dark side. He masters combat. He conquers worlds. He commands armies and syndicates. Yet every time power comes within reach, it slips away. Naboo costs him his body. Mandalore costs him his freedom. Crimson Dawn cannot give him peace. The deeper truth is that Maul spends his life chasing control while remaining trapped by the one thing he never controls at all, himself. The Sith often speak about freedom. They promise liberation from weakness, liberation from fear, liberation from limitation. But Maul's life quietly reveals the opposite. He is taken from Dathomir as a child and taught to hate enemies he has never met. His choices narrow until vengeance becomes the only language he understands. Even when he breaks free of Sidious, he cannot break free of the emotions Sidious cultivated within him. The chains become invisible, yet they remain chains all the same. In that sense, Maul never truly escapes his master because part of his master continues living inside him. What makes Maul fascinating is that he is neither a simple villain nor a fallen hero seeking redemption. Characters like Anakin Skywalker eventually find a path back toward the light. Characters like Obi-Wan Kenobi learn to release grief and continue forward. Maul does neither. He survives everything the galaxy throws at him, yet survival alone cannot heal a wound. Each loss deepens the same obsession. Each defeat feeds the same hunger. As years pass, entire eras of galactic history rise and collapse around him, while he remains fixed upon a single moment beneath the city of Theed. There is also something deeply tragic in how often Maul reaches toward connection. He seeks family in Savage Opress. He seeks purpose through Mother Talzin. He seeks followers in the Shadow Collective. He seeks apprentices in Ezra Bridger and others who cross his path. Again and again, you can sense a lonely figure trying to fill an emptiness that power cannot touch. Yet every relationship becomes poisoned by manipulation, fear, or ambition. The dark side grants strength, but it struggles to create trust. Maul learns this lesson repeatedly, and still he cannot stop searching. Within the larger Star Wars saga, Maul serves as a mirror, standing opposite Obi-Wan Kenobi. Both men lose almost everything. Both endure years of isolation. Both watch the galaxy transform beyond recognition. Yet where Obi-Wan gradually finds acceptance, Maul clings to grievance. Where Obi-Wan learns to serve something greater than himself, Maul remains bound to an old wound. Their final encounter on Tatooine feels inevitable because it is not merely a duel between two warriors. It is a confrontation between two responses to suffering. One chooses peace, the other chooses revenge. Perhaps that is why Maul remains unforgettable, not because he survives being cut in half, not because he wields a double-bladed lightsaber, not because he conquers Mandalore or commands criminal empires. You remember him because he embodies a question that runs through all of Star Wars. What happens when pain becomes the center of a life? Some characters find hope, some find redemption, some find purpose. Maul finds endurance, and endurance without healing becomes its own kind of prison. As the story settles into silence, you can return once more to that forgotten temple. The stone is cold beneath ancient dust. The wind moves softly through ruined corridors carved by civilizations long vanished. A red blade hums in the darkness for a moment, casting its glow across broken walls, and then fades. The light disappears, the echoes linger, and somewhere beyond the darkness, the temple stands quiet again.